Thanks very much, Ming. Thanks very much for having us to give us a chance to present our recent research output. My topic will be very much focused on dual class company regulation for Chinese market. Be more specific, the rule will be what is called a sunset rule. Given the fact that the topic is a little bit strange to most of the audiences, I need to introduce the whole picture in great detail within a time framework. Of course, I will try. So first, what is a dual class company? Dual class company is a company where there are two classes of shares. One class is one share, one vote. The other is one share, more than one vote. Next, please. The feature of dual class companies can be generalized from four aspects. The first one is that dual class companies are very much welcomed by many high-tech and innovation firms. That is because the dual class structure can isolate the impact of capital and let the founders to fulfill their own strategic vision and decisions. So the second feature is basically at the moment, usually many jurisdictions is forbidding the structure to be used by public company. That is because the structure will introduce an excessive risk. In later slides, I will introduce what kind of risk will be introduced. And the third feature is that the structure was first used in the United States for non-high-tech and innovation finance purpose. But that doesn't matter. But one thing we need to bear in mind is U.S. market has the most comprehensive spectrum of dual class companies. And the last feature is at the moment, in terms of a major capital market, only mainland China, Hong Kong, Singapore, and the United States are allowing this structure to be used for listed companies. The first three allow them within 2 years, and the last one has allowed the structure for quite a lot of time, quite many years. So then here's the risk of this structure. The first risk of this structure is basically you can imagine if a controller wants to conduct self-interest dealing conducts. He or she might pay some costs because of he or she has controlling share in the company. However, if under the dual class structure, the controller usually have a lower contribution while have the control of the company, which means the structure can incentivize the controller to engage more self-dealing activities. The second feature, risk of the structure is roughly very closely to the third, that the minority shareholders or non-controlling shareholders of the dual class company usually are facing a risk from change of control. The reason why those shareholders are welcoming the controller who contributes less contribution to have the control over the company is because of the fact that they want to use the knowledge and experience of the founder. However, once the control is changed to somebody else, then the rest of the shareholders' future will be uncertain. So that will be a big threat to the rest of the shareholders and the company's value. And the fourth risk comes from risk-taking behaviors. We know in a corporation, if the control block is smaller than it should be, then the controller usually will be very actively engaging in risk-taking activities because he or she, as a controller, can reap abnormal benefits. And the fifth risk basically is a management quality problem. In a normal corporation situation, managerial quality problem can be solved by a takeover market, which means if the management of a company fail to properly manage a corporation, then the acquirers in the market perhaps going to jump in and take over your company and lay off all the management. In order to avoid being laid off, the management of a normal company usually should work very hard to maximize the value of a firm to prevent the company from being taken over. However, in the dual class structure, if you don't get the consent of the existing controller, you won't be able to get the control of the company. So how can we curb or how can we control the managerial quality problem, which means when the founders management quality decrease, how can we stop it? There are, next please. There are quite a lot of regulatory responses to the risks I've mentioned, but generalize them, we can basically there are 4 aspects what we can do to reduce the risk of the structure brought to us. The first one is no half alteration. What that means? Basically, that means once the corporation successfully IPO'd, then the controlling shareholder cannot convert the one share, one vote structure of the corporation to dual classes structure. That is because if you allow that, minority shareholders will be quite vulnerable, and the value of the firm after conversion could be very hard to be discovered comparing to on the stage of IPO with the involvement of the bank investment bankers. So in most cases, in basically all the jurisdictions, after the IPO, usually the firm cannot convert to a dual class structure. Then the second response is high-tech and innovation industry only, which means only high-tech and innovation firms can choose the structure. That is because previously I said there's a risk. That is a risk-taking behavior of the dual class firms will be quite excessive. Basically, it's very hard to find a legal strategy to solve that problem. Then the only one way at the moment we can solve that problem is we only allow the risk-taking company, such as high-tech company, to use that structure. That is because the shareholders and the management of their company have already quite familiarized with the risk-taking behaviors. They are more prone to take risks in their operation. And the third is in order to prevent self-interested transactions in some significant issues, corporate governance issues, we usually don't allow the controller to exercise its super voting rights in order to reduce the possibility of hurting minority shareholders. The last one is sunset rule. Sunset rule is basically the central and the linchpin of this research. Next slide, please. What is sunset rule? Sunset rule basically can be divided into 3 categories. Basically, sunset rule means the structure, dual classes structure will be regressed or will be returned back to one share, one vote structure once some condition has been met. So event sunset rule means something happened, the structure will be converted. Ownership sunset rule means if the owners of the company, or if the controller of the company's ownership of the share of the company reduced to some benchmark, then the structure will be converted. Then the last one is time-based. Time-based means after some period of time, the structure, dual class structure, will be converted back to one share, one vote. Next slide, please. So at the moment, the risks previously we mentioned, most of them can be supported or can be curbed by legal strategies, but only the last one, management quality problem, without any legal strategies in response to which. Why we don't have any strategy responded to it? Because it's relatively hard. The reason previously I mentioned, if the corporation, a dual class corporation, go onto the market, the takeover market will no longer be able to push its management to work harder. Then Professor Lucian Babchak suggests that we can introduce some structure very similar to time-based sunset rule, which means after some period of time, you will put the dual class company again on the takeover market, so that the management within that period of time should be very carefully, very diligently boost the value of the firm. Next, please. Then what we are interested in, whether Professor Lucian Babchak's suggestion really means, we conducted an empirical research using US data, because US, as we previously mentioned, got the most comprehensive dual class companies choosing sunset rules. We want to see the most important issue we want to see is how time-based sunset rule boosts the value of a corporation. And the second thing, by the way, we're also interested in non-time-based sunset rule, whether that they are effective or not. Given for the consideration of time, please go next page and the next page until you see the conclusion page, please. Yes, again, next, yes. This is the, yeah, please stop. Okay, so basically we have three conclusions after quite a lot of empirical tests. The first one is that the firms with sunset rule are self-selection, have some self-selection issue. That means if you based on US sample to get any conclusion, that conclusion cannot be unanimously applied to all the corporations in the market. That is because most of the firms choosing sunset rule in the United States market, they got their reasons, very similar reasons to choose the sunset rule. This is a first conclusion, which is very important comparing to the antecedent research outputs. Then the second one is event and ownership of sunset rule have no significant boost in firm's value, which is a very big surprise. And we find a reason why is that. That is because the odds of the events or the occurrence of the ownership decrease are very, very low. In that scenario, the market failed to properly respond to the installation of the non-time-based sunset rule. That is reason why it failed to be properly reflected in their prices. But from normative perspective, we think that could be very much justified. That is because all the shareholders come into the firm for the consideration of using the knowledge of the founders. And then the third conclusion is relatively important. That is, we find a group of firms that is startup stage high-tech firms. They react very positively to the rule, which is meaningful for Chinese capital market. We know in the Chinese capital market, basically, we only allow high-tech and innovation firms to be listed on the stock exchange, choosing dual class structure. And what we need to do, perhaps based on the finding of this research, is just divide the two types of firms, startup stage and a non-startup stage, and impose sunset rule that in a period of time, we can push the founder of the firm to maximize the value of the firm, push out the potential of the startup stage firms to their value to the maximum. So basically, those are my conclusions. I think that I'm very much running out of time. Thanks very much. Welcome questions. Thank you.